Hi, this is Chuck Gardner, and this is another one of my boring golf tutorials. In this one, I want to talk about controlling swing plane, how you can do it, a lot of different ways, and why you want to do it. Now, my adventure with golf started in 1983 in the Philippines, where I became a Foreign Service officer. I was working at the U.S. Information Agency's printing plant there. I was deputy director and chief of production, 31 years old, and all my buddies played golf, so I took up golf too. Now, I took some lessons from a Filipino pro who was about this tall and had a different body type, so I really couldn't relate to his swing. It wasn't until I got back to the States in 1987, I was able to find books on golf, and I bought Jack Nicklaus's Golf My Way, Tom Watson, Getting Up and Down in 40 Yards or Less, and I also bought Arnold Palmer's Play Great Golf, I think it's called. So, Jack Nicklaus had a very idiosyncratic swing. His coach, Jack Grout, when he was a kid, was smart enough not to try to change it and conform it. Now, the characteristic of Nicklaus's swing, which he was criticized for from the Hogan flat swing plane baseline, was that in his backswing, he raised his front foot up, which gave him a very high path, a very high steep swing arc. His body type and where he had to be, how he had to arrange his body to find good static balance, made him inclined to have a higher swing plane, a more vertical swing plane than Hogan's, which was flatter. Hogan grew up in Fort Worth, Texas on hard pan, and as a caddy, he was a small, runty kid, and he didn't get a lot of loops. So what Hogan made his money was, when the caddies would have long drive contests, they would all contribute a nickel apiece, and whoever got the longest drive ended up with the pot. The one who got the shortest drive, he ended up picking up all the balls on the range. So Hogan was motivated to hit the ball as long as possible, and that's how he developed his idiosyncratic flat swing, by keeping his elbow tucked in. Nicklaus, on the other hand, was criticized from the Hogan baseline for having this flying elbow. But what that flying elbow does is that sets up the steeper swing plane. Now, you ask, why is one swing plane better than the other? Well, that has to do with shaping shots. The modern golfer, because of the way golf equipment has been marketed for the last 30 years, it's focused on longer, more distance, more power. When in the 40s, the golf courses were shorter, and greens were put at a 45-degree angle to the fairway on purpose to reward people who could shape shots. And if you want to shape a shot into a green that's running this way, what you want to do is hit a fade, because it's going to increase the chances of the ball staying on the green. If the green is running the other direction, you want to hit a draw, because that will cause the shot shape to come in from right to left and have a better chance of standing on the green. Well, in terms of controlling swing plane, if you want to hit a fade, a high fade, a steep swing, which will help the club swipe across the ball, the outside of the ball, and create that tilt of the spin axis, which creates the spin. It's actually a backspin axis on a straight shot is horizontal, like a rotating car wheel or bicycle wheel. What a fade shot does is it tilts the spin axis by swiping across the outside, which tilts the spin axis, which is what causes it to curve. The fade is accomplished the other way. You have to tilt the spin axis that way, and the only way you can do that is to have a very tight inside the center of the ball contact. And that's something that I struggled with when I was shaping shots. When you are coming from a baseline of hitting dead straight, you're aiming the center of your club face, the sweet spot of your club face, which is opposite the dot on your pings. That is aimed at the dead center back of the ball on the target line. But if you're trying to shape shots, the target line moves from straight. The swing line, the target line is still straight, but your swing line that you set up your heels on is going to be either pointing to the left for a fade or pointing to the right for a draw. And then you adjust the face so it faces more back towards the target. That is the old school way before all these 9 different swing laws and all that bullshit. That's how you learn to hit a draw or a fade. That's how Jack Nicklaus taught me to hit them in Golf My Way. I read about it, went out the next day, tried it, and damn if it didn't work. So I've been doing it the same way ever since. And I had modeled my swing after Nicklaus's with raising my back foot, so I was getting a very high, steep swing angle, which made it very, very easy to hit his preferred shot shape, which was a high draw. To hit a high draw, you have to open up your stance so your heel line faces left, and then you bring your club face back, almost facing the target, a little bit left, because you want to start it to the left and have it come back. And I had no problem learning how to hit high fades. It is very much like your typical beginner's slice, only with more control. Now, from the Nicklaus baseline of this high swing arc here, it's very difficult to hit a draw, a low draw from that swing style, because you have to swipe across the inside of the ball. That's what Hogan tried to do. Hogan, in his long drive contests on the West Texas hardpan or the Fort Worth hardpan, he would hit these sweeping hooks. And that's because when the ball lands, it doesn't have a lot of backspin that checks the ball. It checks and then rolls forward with topspin. So Hogan was getting more distance and winning the Nicklaus. But he developed that idiosyncratic problem of having a tendency to snap hook if his timing was off. And what happened with Hogan's swing, the way he moved his hands here, the wrists lock up and then they turn over almost immediately to bring the club up. Now, that is fine if your timing is good, but if your ball stays compressed on the face a split second too long, then you put too much hook spin on. So, how do you control the swing plane from a standard baseline, whatever your standard baseline swing is? Now, that will be determined largely by your body proportions and the club you're using, because if you set up as with that post drill that I have in a previous video and find your point of static balance, and you have your hands overlapping, the bases of your thumbs overlapping on the center of the shaft as always, because that's what makes the Varden grip work like a hinge. You never want to change that. That will cause your arm to fold very quickly, both ways in the swing, which, as I mentioned in the last video, that is not the most powerful way to swing the club, and not something maybe that a 20-year-old would want to do. But if you're an older golfer and you're struggling with control and you're more concerned about control and distance, the earlier you fold your arms in the backswing and the finish, the more controlled your swing path will be. Now, here is something that I did as a beginner, and I see a lot of recreational golfers do. And it happens if you hold the club in just your left hand. As you swing it back, because you have all of this mass on the toe head hinging around the heel of the club, what the momentum of the club wants to do is it wants to swing the club face open in the backswing and then swing it the other way closed. What the Varden grip is designed to do more than anything is to prevent that, to prevent the physics of that. So you ask, well, why don't you just then put the shaft in the middle of the club head like a mallet putter, and then you don't have that problem? Well, the reason is because you want that twisting action of the toe of the club to steer the club on the swing plane. What happens with the club, as you bring it back, it eventually gets to the point where it turns over. And one of the things, because I'm sort of obsessed with cause and effect in physics, I notice there's a cause and effect relationship is how the club feels in this phase of the swing here, where it's swinging back, and then when it finally turns over, this action here, it goes up wherever the toe points. So in this phase here, what you're doing is generating momentum, and then this happens and it flips up. This is why the shaft attaches at the heel. So I got the intuitive insight that the toe of the club is acting like the rudder of a boat, but in reverse. It's like the rudder's in the front pointing forward and it's steering the boat. Where the club toe points will steer the club. Now, if you've taken instructions and you've had an instructor show you the ideal takeaway extension, they will tell you that the ideal way to take the club back is to keep the face of the club looking back at the ball. So as you turn back here, the club face is constantly looking at the ball. If you adopt the fulcrum hinge technique, what happens is you get the same looking back at the ball, but the club head stays closer to the line instead of swinging back as far inside. So this is how I try to do it now, is I hinge it up like this to get my momentum going, and that keeps it down the line longer. Just my logical thought process of how things should work, not anything anybody told me. In fact, it defies conventional wisdom, which says it should be here. But here's the thing about having your toe angle here. When it does turn over, that dictates where your swing plane coming up will be. Mine, because of my body proportions, I have extremely long arms and short legs. So with these standard size clubs, I end up with a swing plane right about shoulder level if I am using this conventional wisdom of having the toe position here in the takeaway. But what I have discovered is that as you take the club away in the initial back swing takeaway movement, whether you do it with a one-piece swing or you hinge it up with this fulcrum technique that I've come up with, either way, if you manipulate the angle of the toe with your hands during the first few inches of travel, it will affect the swing plane coming up and back down. So you can, if you accept the fact that the way the toe points steers the club, then logically you should be able to steer the club on different swing planes by controlling the angle of the face and toe at the point where the hinging of the wrist happens, which is what brings it up and around. So, and what beginners tend to do is they pronate. What does pronate do? It flattens out the club head, face, and toe and brings it back. What happens? They swing it down low, then they have to lift it up, and that's why they come back outside. So, if you are from a normal baseline here and having conventional wisdom says that your face should be at toe should be at a 45-degree angle when you're at extension, if instead you just twist your wrist and twist your wrist coming back here and then get them back into the right position coming back, you will have a flatter swing plane. I can get a flatter swing plane by just doing this. Same mechanism, but what I'm doing is I'm steering the toe flatter as I take the club back. Conversely, if I do the opposite and steer the club forward, it will result in the club reacting with a steeper swing angle. Now, I'm not suggesting that you do this while you're trying to play a round of golf, but this is the type of experimentation I have been doing over the years to try to understand the cause and effect. Now, if I want to do a high, because I've used Nicklaus's swing and then Hogan's swing, if I want to do a high draw, or a high fade, I should say, what I'll do is I'll just lift my foot up rather than leave it on the ground. And if I want a more Hogan-esque swing, I keep my feet grounded, and that gives me the flatter swing. So there are different means to the same end, but what happens with this cause and effect is if you lift your toe, what happens is the toe of the club changes differently than if you keep your foot flat on the ground. So again, this is just a video to try to give you a better understanding of the variables in your swing. So if you are having a problem with your swing plane varying a lot, one of the reasons it varies is that you don't have a consistent takeaway position. If you don't start with a consistent grip and consistent posture, then you're not going to wind up with the club head in 3D space in the same spot with every swing. So, just some food for thought, some more data points to process when you're out practicing and trying to figure out how to make your swing work. So again, thanks for listening. If you find it interesting, if it's helpful, leave a comment. I appreciate that. Thanks for watching.